Hello, everyone, and welcome. Hello. Welcome to this edition of Technical Takeoff. My name is Dave Randall. I'm a senior product manager in the Intune engineering team, and I'm joined by my colleague. Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, folks. I'm Brian Link. I'm a product leader over in the Intune product team as well.
Thanks for joining. And today we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking all things automation. I've been working with our Graph APIs for quite a few years, and hopefully some of you recognize my name either from some of the blog posts that I've done, or maybe we've had some interactions directly on automation. I certainly appreciate all of your feedback that you've given over the years. And this session is going to be a little bit different than some of the other tech takeoffs that you might have attended this week, or earlier this week, or later today, or even tomorrow. So most of the tech takeoffs, we've presented some material to you, but Brian and I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach, and we wanted to really engage deeply with you on your automation needs. And I think, Brian, you and I were chatting a little bit earlier, and one of the things that isn't always apparent to us is exactly what an organization's journey looks like for automation. I get a lot of questions about a specific API. Somebody will say, hey, this API is returning some error code. I don't understand what's going on. Or is there some PowerShell commandlet that can help me achieve something else? Or maybe do you have some sample scripts? I know we've posted a lot of sample scripts, but in this automation story, one of the things that I would really love to get some thoughts from the audience about is, what does the business process automation journey look like for organizations, and what is their actual adoption? Right? Because as I've mentioned, we've got Graph APIs, we've got PowerShell commandlets, we've got a variety of different kind of platform capabilities that exist there today, but it would be really interesting to understand, and this is the prompt for all of you who are watching, to go ahead and make sure that you're in the comment section for this particular session, and put your thoughts about exactly what is your organization's journey around process automation and Intune, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think when you think about your hierarchy of needs, a lot of organizations they're just at a different place when it comes to their journey, as Dave mentioned, right? So, we know that there are elements of Intune that folks would love to automate against. And to Dave's point, they're doing it in various ways. It's just, we'd love to understand the bigger picture, right? Are we looking to, as a hierarchy of need, you're trying to, automate those mundane tasks that are explicit to you? Is it things that go sort of beyond the boundary of your team? Are you looking to plug Intune into broader, tooling and broader organizational, investments? Like, just understanding where everyone is, because I think automation, orchestration, these words are common, but they sort of mean different things to people, and they're used in various ways. So understanding the strategic imperative would be hugely beneficial.
One thing, I had a great conversation with one of our colleagues the other day, and we kind of broke out automation into 3 sections. One of them is admin task automation, so things that you're doing in the console. The other one is client-side automation. I've heard a lot of customers who are interested in automating workflows that happen on the client itself, and then service automation. So, there's a lot of things that from an IT admin perspective, you'll kick off some workflow, you'll create a deployment, you'll maybe change some connector properties, and those will trigger a bunch of backend actions. But some of those things, are just backend service automation that customers would like to do. So I think those are 3 great categories to frame some conversation.
No, I agree. I think we have something that, let's see.
Yeah.
Rob asks, as an MSP, we need a simple way to check if our customers have our standards in place, or what the delta is between the customer configuration and the last defaults we define. Now we try to use M365 DSC, but that's a pretty hefty tool set to wrap your head around. DSC meaning desired state configuration. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, great points. Yeah, Dave, I know you've probably heard a number of folks with similar asks and signals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, M365 DSC, I've been working with Nick Charlevoix, who is kind of the primary person behind M365 DSC, and I know that interestingly there is a lot of Intune support in there, but it's not complete. And so one of the points of feedback that I've heard is that it's a little bit difficult to use when it doesn't have everything that customers need to do their validation against drift. And that's kind of that's a great point from Rob, is that understanding where drift has happened is a key piece of automation, because you don't want to sit in the console and try refreshing policies and see what's changed, or even just simply going to audit logs. That's kind of a difficult place to understand all of the changes that may have impacted clients. So M365 DSC is there. One of the other things that I did with one of my colleagues over in Europe is we did a configuration as code blog post. And this is one of those types of capabilities where we kind of threw it out there as a proof of concept to see how much interest there was in configuration as code. And M365 DSC is very similar in that it allows you to submit changes programmatically that are then validated on the back end before they're pushed programmatically to the Intune tenant. So config as code is one of those other areas that I'm interested, whether or not folks in the audience have automation that they're building for deploying configuration changes, not just validating, whether or not those changes are there and whether or not they've drifted, but whether or not they're building pipelines and so forth.
Yeah, it would be interesting to understand the outcomes of, like, when we talk about desired state management, when we talk about, drift, when we talk about compliance shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's even a different sort of expectation or causality that's expected when those moments happen, depending on the severity or the type of drift and whatnot. So understanding how people are reacting to that today, because I think the easy thing to say is, hey, just if you drift, put it back the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those changes could also be breaking changes. And so how are they managing, how are you managing through that now? I think, when you talk about purpose-driven devices that, like, it's fit to purpose, it's only ever supposed to do these one or two things, that becomes a lot easier because the state is a lot more static. When you talk about knowledge workers, right? Their states can be variable, and compliance becomes this moving target, right? So is the key metric that you're keying off of in those moments is not compliant or state equals as changed, or is it that plus a variable over time or some severity? Like, what's that matrix look like in those outcomes?
So let's see, we had a link up there, aka.ms/configuration as code. That's the blog post. If any of you are interested in taking a look at that post and see what's out there. But to follow on with what you said, Brian, one of the things that from either a drift perspective or just in doing some of that automation, sometimes I feel like our APIs are lacking. And there are, like, for example, we don't have Delta APIs, so you can't ask Intune, give me what's changed since some last period of time.
Right.
And that's one thing. Actually, in all of Graph, there are very few Delta queries that can be done. I think that's one area that I've also heard customers are interested in. But we did get another question from Seedorf, or a comment. We come from a configuration manager background with co-management enabled, looking more at Intune native now, so we're just beginning our automation journey.
Awesome.
Looking for some low-hanging fruit to get started. I think this is a great question. I love this.
Yeah, love that. Low-hanging fruit. So, I mean, where does one start?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, when you guys talk about low-hanging fruit, are you thinking more around, areas where you can automate, policy creation, like things within Intune specifically? Or are you looking at things that you're looking to do on endpoints, like helping with enrollment, helping with compliance checks, et cetera?
Yeah, and I kind of go back also to those three areas, right? We have the IT admin tasks automation. That's one thing where actually the PowerShell sample scripts that are out there in GitHub, those can help with a bunch of those. There's the client-side automation like you suggested, and then there's some service automation. So might be good to get a little bit of clarification on where you'd like to focus.
Drop them in the chat. We have something from Alan here. He's got a couple questions, so I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
Currently, I run a script daily to ensure that an AAD group is populated with devices based on a particular property, one that's not available as an option in Azure Dynamic group properties. He's looking for recommendations here, right? The second is they run a deprovisioning task sequence in ConfigMan when recycling devices. This task sequence does a bunch of things for us, such as clearing the BIOS password, applying generic image, removing the device from AD and CM, and they're looking to add a secure method to remove the device from Azure, Intune, and Autopilot as well.
So on the first one, I know that the Azure AD team or the Entra team now have been looking at ways to improve the overall dynamic group query and supported properties method. So one thing that I would suggest, Alan, is make sure that you're using any communication pipelines that you have to provide feedback on what you need, so that the team knows that that's a property that you're interested in querying for and building, including devices based on that particular property. So I would offer that. But if it's not supported, then most likely running your script on a daily basis is probably the way to do that. I'm not sure whether you're using something just like an interactive PowerShell prompt, or using Azure Logic Apps, or some type of automation framework for that. But that would be my other suggestion if you're just doing that manually. Look to some of the automation frameworks to help build some scheduling into that. And then on the second question, I'll give a stab at this, and then if you have any thoughts, Brian, as well.
Sure.
Looking to add a secure method to remove the device from Azure, Intune, and Autopilot. I'm not 100% sure about what you mean by a secure method, because any of the scripts that you're running to go do this, let's see, if you're looking to replace, I guess I'm not clear. If you're looking to replace the deprovisioning task that you're doing in task sequence with a script, but if you are, then you might take a look at my blog post on Config as Code, because in that, what we do is we create an ADO pipeline, and that ADO pipeline calls into PowerShell scripts. Those scripts are stored in, and they can be stored in a secure location, whether that be a SharePoint location or GitHub, so that they can be authenticated against or validated against any changes. And then we also talk about how to use Azure Key Vault for your credentials, so that you're not storing the credentials in clear and you're checking out your credentials. So take a look at that and see whether or not that helps. Yeah,
and Dave, the first point you were, as an aside, you were saying you weren't sure what they were using for tooling. I think that would be something we would love to understand as well, right? So those that are working to automate against, Intune capabilities, or to solve some of these problems beyond scripting, what tooling are you using, right? And if you're not using something, if you had a magic wand, what tooling would you use, right? I'd love to hear that. We got a question from Rob. Rob says, I'd like something simple to create policies offline from Intune to be able to upload them into an environment. For example, if a tenant is not available yet, just to be able to already create stuff when the tenant and licenses are available.
So one of the capabilities that was recently added is the ability to export configuration profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coupled with an import capability. So one of the things that's really nice about that is it automatically takes care of read-only properties for you,
Mm-hmm.
clears them out. It doesn't do assignments, but I'll say it's not an automated process, but it's a process that exists and it has a graph API behind it. So that means it can be easily automated. So in the console, when you're looking at your configuration profiles, there's an export button in it and an import button, and you can use that to create a version of that policy that can then be translated to any other tenant. So if you've got a tenant that you're standing up and you wanted to copy over a configuration profile, that capability is there in console. And just for everyone's benefit, if you haven't done this little magic trick, while you've got the console open, press F12 to bring up developer tools, and you can monitor the traffic using the developer tool, and you can see exactly the graph API that the console is using to perform any action. And that makes it real easy to understand exactly which graph API you need to use, either for your PowerShell script, or if you're using some other automation. If you're doing regular dev coding, then you'll know exactly which API. So again, for this particular one, the import export, that's a great way to understand the specific one. Much easier than going to the API reference documentation and trying to search and find it there.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Dave, I believe Courtney wrote a blog post about this and how you can actually use Power Automate to duplicate some of the policies as well, which I know customers have leveraged. That's less about maybe first time creation, but it certainly helps when you have multiple tenants and they need to have very, very similar policy sets that may have some deviation. Like maybe you have a number of retail environments or whatever, some need to have various tenants that look and feel the same.
Yeah, and for everyone in the audience's benefit, Courtney's last name is Bernier, and he has a website, UEM for All, with the number 4 in the middle. That'll help you get to that quickly. Okay, we've got something from Blake.
Yeah, Blake says, we'd love to be able to run workflows with approvals around software installation from company portal to allow us to better control licensed software without redirecting the user to the web portal. Integrating into something like ServiceNow on the back end. I will tell you, Dave, we've never heard this before.
No, at least not yet today, right?
No,
until now.
not this hour. No, yeah, we've heard this a lot, and I think we clearly understand the demand signal. So I know that, I believe there's some work that you've been talking about with ServiceNow integration, but I don't know if approvals are in there or not, Dave. But I do know that we've had a lot of conversation internally around, how we could better improve and maybe even, enable some capabilities similar to this. So loud and clear, heard.
Yeah. The ServiceNow integration that we have right now allows you to view incidents in the troubleshooting blade. So if you're if you're a help desk person, you can see what other incidents a user has raised while you're looking in Intune. But I think I've also heard as the PM for ServiceNow, as well as our graph APIs, that people are interested in being able to do tighter integration with ServiceNow on the back end, whether that's generating a new incident that says I need some software, or also I've heard better integration with the software asset management piece. So those are definitely things that I'm looking at.
We got from Sigurd for tenant configuration automation. We have multiple companies in one tenant, and they would have their own IT teams with different skill levels. So RBAC is critical for us with distinct roles. PIM for roles, dynamic group, administrative units. So if we M&A a new company on these configurations, or these configurations need to be added for a new company, we're currently looking at Azure DevOps to have a pipeline running such added configurations.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right approach. I know that you in M&A, a lot of times there are standards that you want to deploy to each of the different areas of ownership. And like Sigurd says, there are different skill levels, different permissions that you want to allow those localized IT departments to be responsible for, but you still want to have some centralized control and ensure that they're adopting kind of base company standards. So I think using Azure DevOps and a pipeline for running those configurations, I think that's absolutely the right approach right now.
Yeah, and what are the rest of you doing when it comes to your automation sort of workflows, when it comes to your RBAC and security models? Like, what are the security roles that you're leveraging in the tooling that we talked about? Or if you're doing much of this through scripting, like, what are the processes that you guys are employing, or maybe tooling you're employing to make sure that security is top of mind, and you're thinking of how to distribute these things across and managing the life cycle of them? That'd be great to understand.
And are you kind of hinting at whether or not you have delegated authentication, like you're running this under a user's context, or whether or not you're building a service and you're doing service-to-service calls with app-only auth? Is that also part of what you're getting at, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, is this something that's driving these are user-driven, or is it you're using service principles? Are you doing service-to-service? Are you, leveraging, going old school and doing service accounts? Like, we just want to understand how people are tackling the problem today, and how they would optimize it further, right? Another question here. During Autopilot, this is from Penu. During Autopilot, during Autopilot, most customers create a PowerShell script to modify the device, such as remove unnecessary apps, modify Windows built-in apps, make registry changes, etc., and then deploy it as a Win32 app. It would be great to have a task sequence like Engine to Intune to divide a complex task to multiple step tasks with built-in logging, reporting, error control. Long PowerShell scripts tend to be difficult to maintain, understand, and when the company or the person who made it has left the company. That's true. Yeah, lifecycle management of scripting is an Achilles heel for a lot of companies. I think that's part of the reason why I think it's been more popular to look for these sort of like no-code, low-code type solutions, or to leverage automation frameworks to both, minimize the need for scripting, but then also to ensure that the life cycle of those tasks is far more transparent and well understood and documented in a way that is transient, right? It's not something that sort of follows the life cycle of whoever created it. Which, if you're one individual deep, then that becomes a real problem. So completely hear that. And as to, the ask to have some task sequencing like capabilities that sort of mirror that, it's certainly an ask that we've heard.
Yeah, and that, going back to our 3 areas of automation, that one clearly fits in the client-side automation.
Agreed. From Nathan, I wish Microsoft would disable devices in Entra once they are wiped in Intune, returning it to the same state it was before it was first enrolled in Intune. As it is, the device is removed from Intune once it begins the wipe, and if the device fails to wipe, the user only has to click past an error message to have a functioning yet unmanaged device. We have asked all the techs to always perform a secure wipe.
Yeah, even though the focus of this is around automation and things that customers can do, I kind of feel like this is just a core feature ask. Something that the system should do when you're doing a retire or a wipe, have the ability to go clean up Azure AD or Entra as well. So this is also a good point of feedback that I've heard lots of times. And there have been, I've seen where people have scripted this capability using some fairly simple scripts with polling, which is rudimentary, but it works, gets the job done. But we'll take this back definitely to the device management team.
Yeah,
make sure that they're hearing this feedback too.
Yeah, he follows up and says that often, even though the intention is to perform that secure wipe, it sounds like there's often, sort of that human factor of, I forgot to check the box, or I didn't do it because it takes longer. And then that requires the user to F12 because, most OEMs, have issues with insanity checks before wiping TPMs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, either going that last mile and making sure that we're doing the appropriate retirement actions, not just within Intune, but carrying the ball over to Entra and there's other areas, or just ensuring that we're, you know, closing the loop for anyone sort of, you know, circumventing control in a way that's easy and accessible. It sounds like that's the feedback. Let's see, we've got another one from Dana. I hope I said that right. Recently, I had to create some intermediate Intune administrator roles, but then also had to add directory read on the Azure AD side just for intermediate admin to be able to manage their devices and their groups. It was not a guess and a check. It was not a guess and check since we did not know why they were in Endpoint.
That's interesting. Generally, the Intune Service Admin directory role gives you everything that you need to do in Intune, but adding directory read on the Azure AD side must mean that there's a property, and I would assume that directory gives you group read, you know, basic read on directory objects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing thematically as we go across, right? It sounds like you've got some folks that are just saying, listen, there are holes within the product today that we'd love to solve. And maybe that's with automation, maybe that's with core capabilities and features and functions. Some of it is, hey, I've got these tasks that I would just like to not have to deal with because they're time consuming, because they are, you know, they are mundane, you know, et cetera. And then the last one is really around how do I prevent human error, like consistency, right? Making sure that if the process is I'm supposed to check the box, then why are we giving humans the ability to not check the box? Because the problem, whenever you think about any task, is the person, you know, we're human, we're fallible. We aren't consistent creatures by design. And so those are the things I'm hearing. I'd love to know. I don't think we have time here because we're close to the top. But as follow-ups, you know, when you think about how you're interacting with our APIs, when you think about how you're interacting with Intune, again, what are those tools? What are those processes? But also, where are we not performant, or where do we have limitations that are preventing you from achieving those goals within those APIs? How are we fit to scale for what you would want to do if you had the magic wand, right? And then,
I think those are good questions, and you know, the feedback is open for the rest of the week for all of you. So please feel free to continue to comment. Brian and I will be monitoring those. We'll be answering questions to those comments, and I think we've got some great takebacks for the team. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Thank you for being willing to share your needs, your concerns, and I'm looking forward to the next opportunity that we have to meet and talk more automation.
See you, everybody. Thank you.